Welcome to Equity and Excellence in Our Schools, Episode 1, with your host, Dr. Stephen Peters and Dr. Mark Wilson. And now it's time for Episode 1.
I want to thank Albany State University and the Education Leadership Program, Dr. Janice Carthon, the head of the UPPI, the University Preparation Initiative that she works on there with the Wallace Foundation, for their generous support to allow us to bring these events to you. So thanks to Albany State University. And as we get started, here's a little bit about the work they do there.
You love being an educator and inspiring young minds. And yet, all around, you see gaps. Students need inspiration. Teachers need coaching. Districts need leadership. And communities need engagement. With the right tools and preparation, you can make a difference as an educational leader to help students thrive, improve systems, to foster success for districts and communities. Lots of programs can offer you credentials, but what really puts you on the path to make an impact? An educational leadership degree or certificate from Albany State University. Because at ASU, you get so much more. Here you'll gain skills to inspire teachers and staff, learn to implement systemic change, and deliver new approaches for data-informed problem solving. You'll learn to engage families and communities, advocate for equity, and improve student outcomes. You'll become the high-impact leader that you want to be and that districts want to hire. All in a nationally recognized program reimagined by educational experts, with academic rigor and customized guidance from faculty, mentors, and coaches who are invested in your success. They'll help you reach your goals so you can help others reach theirs. The ASU program combines a year of remote learning with a cohort of supportive peers, plus real-world practical practice. So you are not just learning, you are leading. Are you ready to make an impact? Learn more about the educational leadership programs at Albany State University and put your passion into practice.
Again, thanks to Albany State University and Dr. Janice Carthon and the Wallace Foundation for their generous support of these efforts. And this is our first of 5 3-part units on equity and excellence in our schools. And Stephen and I are privileged to have with us experts in the field. Please allow me to introduce them. Tommy Welch is Chief Equity and Compliance Officer for the Gwinnett County Schools. The Gwinnett County Schools, 177,401 strong, Tommy. So it's a big task for everyone, and we're really grateful for you to lean in on your colleagues across the country today and be able to help us learn what you've learned in your work. Prior to Tommy's work as Chief Equity Officer, Tommy was the principal of Meadow Creek High School. And while he was there, he was named the 2017-2018 Georgia Principal of the Year by the GASSP. And he was a finalist for National Principal of the Year for his work there. And with us also today, a fellow colleague of Tommy's from Gwinnett County, and she's our 2020 National Principal of the Year. And if we stay on the pandemic, Kerensa, I think you just get to be National Principal for forever. We're very proud of both of you from GASSP and from NASSP, your associations. And Kerensa is the principal at Collins High School. She was named the Georgia Principal of the Year by GASSP, and then the National Principal of the Year by NASSP. And as always with me is my friend, my co-host. He's been on Oprah, so he gets to be our Oprah, but he's even stronger than that. Stephen Peters. Stephen has been a teacher, a coach. He's been an internationally and nationally recognized speaker. He left the speaker world and came back to serve as a principal at Orangeburg Wilkinson and good things follow him everywhere. When he was at that school in Orangeburg, South Carolina, the BBC offered to follow him around for a year. How about that, principals, huh? And so the work that Stephen and his team did at Orangeburg Wilkinson at OW can be seen on the American High School National Geographic. And so currently Stephen is the president of the International Literacy Association. And when he is not doing that, he and I are enjoying our work in Georgia and across the country. Stephen, how are you today?
Great, Mark. Thank you. Thank you. And hello to our audience all over the country. Some of you are having some snow. I know it's beautiful and the kids are excited. We are happy to host this event today and thank ASU and the Wallace Foundation. Wow. Finalists for National Principal of the Year and National Principal of the Year. For those of you who don't know, and I don't think Kerensa or Tommy even know this, I met Mark Wilson when he won the National Principal of the Year award in Washington, D.C. I just happened to be the speaker that year for MetLife that was sponsoring all of the state principals of the year. And that was the day I met Mark Wilson. We've been friends in this work, trying to advance it, trying to make sure that we're doing seminal education work as we connect. So don't want to waste another minute of time, especially with our two guests today. I'm going to be issuing some prompts, questions, conversation around equity and excellence. And the first one to begin, and either one of you could jump in to begin, Tommy or Kerensa. The pandemic, COVID-19, has delivered some harsh truths to public education in America. It exposed more inequities than imagined. What are you doing in your district or school to dismantle systems that are not delivering equitable outcomes for students?
I guess I'll start is the first thing we had to begin to identify what wasn't working. And during a pandemic, it was hard to get the data because, sometimes people aren't where they typically would have been, meaning whether it's district staff, whoever would collect the data. So we had to identify where our gaps were. I think the first thing that we realized, and I think that most people did across the nation, was that students relied on the schools for a lot of additional resources besides teaching and learning. So first thing we had to figure out is how are we going to get food and resources to our students if they could not come in the building. So we had to reorganize how we distributed breakfast and lunch to our students. We had to reorganize how it was packaged for our students and do that in a totally different way. But that allowed us to see some of our current structures that we had in place that maybe weren't serving our students to the best of their capability. One of the areas that I think was a blind spot for us as an organization was how many students did not have technology in their home as a learning tool. So we had to pivot very quickly and purchase additional items, but not only just purchase them, we are not a one-to-one district, so we had to make sure that they were available. So our principals had to work very hard to overextend communication and engage our students to find out what they did not have. So even today, just I think it was yesterday, the superintendent announced he purchased over tens of thousands laptops to ensure that we can meet the need that may be coming in the very near future.
So Tommy, what do you think about, Mark mentioned how large your district was and is. What do you think about those small rural districts that can't afford to purchase those computers or laptops? I was a superintendent of a small rural district, 6,000 students, and I know money was not lying around and we certainly couldn't find it when we needed it. What advice as a district office executive do you have for those districts?
I would say, leverage the business partners. And if you don't have any business partners, leverage corporations and nonprofits that are willing to assist in that space. Even I will tell you that when we first started this journey, there was not a pot of money for us to purchase extra devices. So I called every business partner that we had, those that were in our area and those that were not in our area. Large corporations that I knew that were trying to donate. We nickel and dime our way to different devices. We even repurposed devices. So we took old devices that people probably wouldn't think of using, and we gutted them and spent $100 to put in a new drive, and then use that device until we were able to get brand new devices. So you have to be creative in finding those resources.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I thought about, and Kerensa, you can jump in, was the fact of Bloom and Maslow. A lot of people who don't do this work, who observe it from afar, have no idea that what you all are being asked to do, you all meaning administrators, teachers, paraprofessionals, staff members in schools, you're being asked to perform miracles every day right now. So Mark and I we just honor the work that you're doing. And I want to remind everybody who's listening today, the fact that nobody's ever done this work before. No one has ever done this work before. Second point I want to make is nobody can do it like you. And so, we're honored to be able to bring a platform to you like today so that you can hear from some of the best in our field. Kerensa, your points.
I think on the logistics side, we've probably all learned a lot about how to do a good drive-through. We do drive-through lunches every day. We do drive-through pickups for technology. So there's contactless. I mean, we did drive-through graduation gown pickups and all sorts of things last spring that I would never have dreamed that we would have done. But, and Tommy, they did a great job at the district level putting together those business partners to even get us hot spots to get home to kids, because not only did they need the computer, they also needed the internet. And I'm sure that's a huge need around the country. And our business partners really stepped up and assisted us with that. The other thing that we really discovered was when we got technology in students and parents' hands, they still needed a lot of instruction on their end to make that viable at home. And our parents still needed a lot of help in understanding what the learning platforms were, how to help their students. I mean, I can't imagine being the parent of a kindergartner right now and trying to deliver digital learning and being the parent that's having to assist with that. So we really looked at bringing in our parents and families one-on-one in the safest way possible in order to give them some instruction, plus providing video tutorials on how our learning platforms worked and how the devices worked. And really, we've continued to do that throughout the year. As parents have needed assistance, we've provided evening times for them to sign up with our local school technology support teachers to really provide that one-on-one assistance with students and families to help them be successful with their learning. And I think that's gone a long way in community building and the parents not feeling like they're out there on their own as well.
Absolutely. So I'm a strong believer that we can't just talk about equity, that in schools and school districts, we must create a space for equity to produce equitable outcomes, because equity is not enough. We need to produce equitable outcomes. What steps can leaders and teachers in districts take to ensure more than talk?
You want me to start? Or?
You go right ahead, Tommy. You've got a great framework for change, and then I'll fill in some practical details.
All right. So I think the first thing is, you really got to know your environment. So there are all types of needs assessments that are out there when you want to take that step in the space of equity. So I always encourage that. You got to know the space that you're in, understand what your current environment may need. But I think it's important to identify that you need to have a cycle of change that you're going to take your organization through or your school. So there's best practices in regards to change models that you can use and things of that sort. But I think it's important to know that you're still going to follow the change model. What you're going to do within that is you're going to embed the work of equity within it. So you first have to create that sense of urgency. So taking a look at your data, and there are all types of protocols where you disaggregate the data and take a look at it through the lens of equity. And how do you prepare your staff to have those difficult conversations? There's tools to do that. We use a lot of tools to do it, courageous conversations and things of that sort. There are protocols out there that can help you move through that. But I want to take you through a couple of steps that, in my school that we had to really do. We had to set the expectations for the norms of how we're going to communicate in the space of equity. So before we were able to have those conversations and do those deep data dives, we talked about the purpose of education. What does it mean in our local school context? What is the purpose of Meadow Creek High School's role in public education? How do we want to deliver it? So we begin to really talk about equity and what equity means at Meadow Creek High School. So that was important for us as a staff, because it really began to codify what was our vision and our mission and how did it work in the space of equity. So we had a common understanding of why we were there. I want to give you all an activity that we use. It was from schoolreform.org, and it was a protocol that we used, and it talked about the purpose of education, and it helped us really move through that. And then the next step that we did is we really went into the sphere of influence. So we talked about education as a whole, and in the space of equity, what are the things that we're responsible for and we can control? And where do we need others to help us leverage these spaces of equity? So I thought that was important for us to begin to move forward that work. But I'm going to stop there because that takes you through, begins to start that change process. So I wanted to show you how I began to set that sense of urgency. And then we develop teams, which, when you take you through a change model, you have to develop teams so that you can move forward the work. So we developed teams that had very clear goals attached to equity. So in our space, we had culture and climate. We had, of course, the regular school improvement team. We had community engagement that was involved. We had student engagement that was involved. So there were different aspects that we felt needed to be addressed in the space of equity. And then, of course, we go through the CQI model with the change model, bringing it back and reevaluating it every year. So those are some things that I think we should do. But to answer your question, after the change process, I think that the most important thing of taking equity from talk to action is there needs to be quantifiable goals. You have to have that. There has to be a goal. You have to be able to measure it, and it has to be attached to what your value chain is. So if your value chain in your organization is student achievement, graduation rate, people have to see that the importance of equity gets you to that end goal of the value chain. You can't have a separate measurement, and it has to be attached. So I thought that I still do that at the district office. Everything is attached to our value chain.
It's interesting because you mentioned change several times, and Mark Wilson said something to me a couple of weeks ago. We were doing a planning session, and we're working on a process now that we're going to be working with 10 school districts for a period of 3 years. It's called ONE, just very simply, ONE. And Mark said, and I quote, we don't want to change what people do. We want to change people so they can change what they do. That's Dr. Mark Wilson. So profound, but I think this is a time and an age and a segment in our history where we need to simplify the complexity of our work. And if we have a process, and you just talked about the one that oriented you and the work that you do, if we have a process that walks us through and that we can have checkpoints along the way, this equity work is not easy. And people who are serious about engaging in equity and excellence will reap so many benefits, because you'll see your students grow, but you'll see your teachers and your staff grow as well. And in the process, as a leader, you can't help but grow. So, Kerensa, interested in hearing what you have to say on that.
I will say probably my journey began as a personal journey, because I grew up in a very rural homogeneous environment. And so I've really had to do a lot of reading and staff, just professional development for myself in order to be able to lead a change process surrounding equity. So I've done a tremendous amount of reading. I've attended numerous workshops. I'm continuing to do that work and continuing to talk to people. So that's kind of where my process began. And I am probably in the early stages of what Tommy did at Meadow Creek. I'm not as far down the road as he is. We're still laying foundations for that work of change and analyzing data. And in the process, we'll be doing our school accreditation this next year, and that equity goal setting and those teams are going to be part of that process. And so that's where we are headed. But the main thing that I could say as far as moving things from talk to action is really making sure that you keep it in front of your staff and the entire staff, not just your teachers. There has to be focus on the entire staff because we are all there to support each and every student, and making sure that we all have the equity lens that we're looking through to make sure we're providing those opportunities and pushing our students to get there. I think in my leadership journey, one of the things that was so very important to me was the invitation, the power of that invitation, and the power of encouragement. Like I would not have won 2020 National Principal of the Year had Tommy not been there pushing along. He helped prepare me for some of those things. So, I mean, just, making sure that you're working as a team and that you're making those invitations for people to grow as leaders, especially our students, and making sure that we're incorporating all of our stakeholders, and really giving our parents voice through different avenues to be able to provide development for our community that they want, that they see as a need for our community. Really giving our students a voice to be able to, take action on the equity that or the steps that they see as being needed in our community. So we have a lot of student leadership opportunities. Our students lead a leadership summit every year, a service summit. Our Black student unions having a night of community leaders where they're speaking and talking about their careers and how through their careers they support our community, and they're all local. So it's great for our students to see those local examples of successful individuals. And we're really, I've got a peer leadership group, which is a very diverse group. I mean, I've got students in there who have been through a disciplinary hearing. So we're really trying to create a scenario where we have kids from all walks and have them work together on projects in the school where they see a need. So in some of our equity work, we're doing walkthrough observations, and we're having our parents do that. Since we have digital learners at home, we have our local school council that are doing some of those walkthroughs using Zaretta Hammond's observation tool just to look at culturally relevant teaching, to give some feedback to teachers. So our students are doing that, our parents are doing that, our teachers are observing one another, and that's been a powerful start to our work.
You mentioned Dr. Zaretta Hammond, and when my next prompt talks about expectations, and Dr. Hammond speaks boldly on the fact when we're dealing with a diverse student population that oftentimes we underdevelop the cognitive skills of our Black and Brown children, and we undermine their abilities to be intellectual scholars. As an African-American male coming up in the public school system, that spoke to me. But fortunately for me, I had a teacher in the 7th grade who was more interested in my academic journey than my athletic journey. Though she came to my basketball games, she never talked to me about the points I scored on the basketball court. She talked about my profound ability to write. And lo and behold, I became a best-selling author. She knew more than I did, but she also told me how smart I was, and I believed her. And she happened to be one of the first white teachers I ever had in public schools was 7th grade. And so, it comes down to a point in time, I think, where we pay less attention to what color we are, and we pay attention to the heart that we have for this work. So my next question is around the subject of expectations. What role do expectations play in our equity work?
They play a huge role. I mean, you have to have high expectations for each student, and it's not something that should be lowered. It's something that we should, with care, push students towards, and then help them meet those high expectations. It is, and that's one of the things that I think we've struggled with somewhat in the pandemic, and we did a staff development session yesterday on this particular thing. You know, the teachers have been learning this year about how to concurrently teach in our district. So they have some students on Zoom, some students in the classroom, and they're trying to do both at the same time. And they don't have quite as, it takes longer to do everything. And so I told them yesterday, I was like, look, we don't have a test at the end of the year this year. I said, so go deeper. Don't rush through things and you know, don't do fill in the blank worksheets, because it's easy to do and manage between the two platforms. And it was great to hear. We had a lot of teacher voices in our professional learning yesterday, and one of the teachers said, yeah, I tried a Socratic seminar. I didn't think it would work. I had everybody turn their camera on. So it was just one of those light bulb moments that, yes, continue to challenge them, because they'll engage if you challenge them. It's when you're not challenging them that they're turning their cameras off and you see a sea of alphabets on your screen.
So Tommy, in my book, Do You Know Enough About Me to Teach Me, I write a chapter, and the chapter title is Nobody Rises to Low Expectations. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think, you know, you always have to have high expectations for your students. And I'll just say, you know, typically what you find is in urban environments, the standard of learning is usually lower because of low expectations. You want to make sure that you provide the same expectations as you would want in any instructional setting. So in doing that with the appropriate amount of support to ensure that the students can be successful. So there's all types of terms that are used, and theoretical research is done, you know, everything from being a warm demander, which is an instructional strategy that they talk about, of, you know, always asking and having high expectations, but doing it in a way that encourages the student, provides them with the necessary support so that they can be successful, but not ever lowering your standards. When I was a principal, we called it rigor with nurture. But I think it starts at the top, and it starts with the leader. You don't lower your expectations, and you ensure that you're always moving forward, but you provide the support. You see evidence of that in different areas. And as an instructional leader, I think it's important that you monitor your data in the classes that your students are taking to ensure that you're not unintentionally lowering your standards of expectations. And it shows up in the number of students that you have. If you're a middle school educator, the number of students you have that are enrolled in 8th grade Algebra 1, take a look at who's actually enrolled in those classes. When you're a high school, you take a look at your advanced placement and your gifted student population. Take a look at who's in those classes and who's identified. If you're in elementary school, take a look at who's actually making it to that 3rd grade magical year being tested for gifted. Is it just based upon the teachers who are recommending them, or are you digging in the data and looking for potential and encouraging your students and stretching them and creating the high standards? So I think that there are measurements that you can take a look at to determine whether or not your standards are high and you're continuing to stretch your students. So I think that there's wonderful data that can help support that, but there are theoretical frameworks that can help you if you're thinking of ways of how do you engage that in your leadership.
Kerensa and Tommy, let me jump in here a second, Stephen, if you may. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about during the last year, we've been invited into the homes of our kids, right? Via this. And in doing so, do you think that has given us a clearer picture and a greater insight, or has it in some ways lowered our expectations based on what we think an ideal environment ought to look like. I guess it's that quintessential question about empathy. And look, we've all said a lot of times this year, grace over grades. Where's the intersection of grace and lowering expectations, particularly for the kids who can't afford for us to do so?
I think
I
that's good.
feel, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kerensa. I'll let you start first.
I feel like that, you know, it has given our professional staff some empathy for students and in their home environments in some cases. But I also feel like part of the struggle this year has been our teachers feeling like they had self-efficacy in what they were doing. And so I do think that in some cases they haven't challenged students and had high enough expectations. And that's been our conversation and feedback throughout the year, because they were not comfortable in the platforms that they were using in many cases when the year began. So really, you know, at this point, they should be comfortable, and we should be, you know, providing some more rigorous opportunities for students. And if we're not, how are we doing that? You know, for our grace over grades, we tried to shift. We were on a semester grading scale. So I tried to shift my teachers' mindsets from, because we had some kids that ghosted us till the 9-week mark, and they figured out, oh, they're really going to assign grades this semester. But we really tried to figure out how can we have a mindset of year-long grading, because we don't have that scale. But how can we do that, and what can we do at our local level to manage that? And so we really have looked at kind of, you know, if we didn't get it first semester, can we get it by the end of the year? And what are those big rocks, those main standards the students really need to be able to move on to the next level and be successful? And so we've really had to think about aligning our instruction differently and making sure we knew what those power standards were, so that we could move the students forward. And we may have to go back and reteach. We're doing a lot of credit recovery, but holding on to that grade. And if they can get it by the end of the year, we'll go back and replace grades, because, you know, from first semester, kind of what we're looking at doing at the local level, just to try to make sure that our kids are successful and on track for graduation. We have made the focus the learning, though. It's what we've been focusing on, not the grade.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned grading. We talk about equity. We very seldom delve into the world of grading practices as it pertains to equity. Heard my good friend Pedro Noguera talk about the fact that we grade first drafts of students, knowing we know that our first draft is not our best work. And so, you know, this gives us a wonderful opportunity during the process of coming through this pandemic piece, not to ever want to go back to normal. I cringe when I hear people say, I can't wait to go back to normal. Please don't do that. Those of you who are here, call your friends, call your cousins when you get off this webinar and say, don't go back to normal. We need to create a new normal, which leads me to my next question or statement. That is, the education system is not broken. I hear a lot of people say, oh, the system is broken. It's not broken. It is delivering exactly what it's designed to deliver. And it's not working anymore. That's why we must take this opportunity. We must realize that we can't miss this opportunity to redeem ourselves in public education. One way to do that is through the equity work that we're engaging in. One thought, demography is not destiny. Mark talked about going into homes or seeing students' homes through the virtual world. And I thought it was a profound question. You know, what did that do? What impact did that have? Primarily because the eyes only see what the brain is able to process. And so we can see the same thing, but our brain is processing it differently. And so there's deeper work that we need to do at the teacher level. And it's so comforting and positive to hear Kerensa talk about the fact that we can't just engage teachers. We have to engage everybody, that works in the school. Everybody's important. Everybody's equally important. The custodians, the cafeteria workers, the bus drivers. Lo and behold, my goodness, last week I saw so many testaments to bus drivers. Where have you been the past, 20, 30 years? They've been here. They've been doing the same jobs that they're doing now. Tommy mentioned the fact that when we came into the fold of the pandemic, that certain things took priority, like kids making sure that kids were eating. I read that school districts have served millions of meals to students. And so the work that you do can't be underestimated. And we have to make sure that we look deep at the system that we've been working in and that a new system evolves. Next question. As leaders, we are trained and told what we should be doing. But many of us have never been trained to be able to understand what we should stop doing. What is this work on equity and work through the pandemic? How has it opened your eyes to things that you should stop doing?
I think that the biggest thing you learn is what is actually creating what I call the return on investment. And that is something that I've learned to do as a principal as well. Am I getting the results that I've desired, and how much effort have I put into that? And is it worth the effort of continuing to do, even if we've been doing it for 10 years or 15 years? Mm-hmm. So speaking in those terms, that's how I have over the years begin to decide, okay, what is it we need to stop doing? And even if there's a book or 3 books that says that it should be done, if it's not working in this current environment, then maybe it may not be best for us. Or maybe we need to evaluate how we're actually doing it. So that was the thing that helped me the most. But I've taken the ROI framework and use it now. Mm-hmm. And say, we don't have a year to figure this out. So we need to get this done in 15 days. Mm-hmm. What's going to give us our highest return on investment? We can't get together 500 people and talk about it and go through the whole change model. So now we need to cut that down in half. And can we make a decision that we think that everyone can agree on within 3 days and get it rolled out effectively so that it can impact students' lives? Also, through that, we learned that there's a lot of red tape that needs to be cut. Mm-hmm. That was preventing students from getting resources and learning just because we wanted to maybe gain others' input or that there was bureaucracy that was in place. So one thing that we've learned is that bureaucracy in education may not be what's best for students, and we need to be a little bit more nimble for our students to really provide equity. Mm-hmm. So that was one thing. And I think that the best thing that I've learned in this process through COVID-19 is that politics have no place in doing what's best for students.
What'd you say, Tom? I didn't hear you. What'd you say?
Politics have no place in doing what's best for students.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
right.
Yes, sir. Yes, okay. Sir. So
I thought that's what you said.
Yeah, that's what I said, sir.
Mark Wilson is doing an excellent job capturing highlights in the chat box. I'm going to encourage those of you who have questions or comments to use the chat box. I cannot believe that we're at 4:40, Mark. I mean, we're 40 minutes into this thing. Time is flying, and I don't want it to end.
Stephen, I do have something I'd love to ask both Tommy and Kerensa, if I may. First for Tommy, in your work, I know you talked a lot about the processes, and I hope you shared some of that in the chat, and I hope people can learn, because when you're taking on something as large as you are, that kind of scale, it requires processes, right? But let me ask you, in this work, what are you most proud of? Where do you feel like that you moved the ball up the hill a little bit?
So when I hear things like Kerensa mention things like equity teams, a year ago, we didn't do equity teams. when I see things like an ethnic studies course that we did not have in our curriculum last year, and it was done very quickly and in the best interest of our students. When I see that our funding formula has been changed to serve our students who are in most need between the space of 75% or higher in free reduced lunch, and we didn't have an equity policy. That was within 10 to 12 months, all those things were done. And it shows you that things can be done. You just got to find a way to do them. And the pandemic has expedited a lot of those things.
Tommy, thanks for that. I've got one more question, Stephen, and I'll bounce back to you. Is this to Kerensa? Because you have to have this question asked to you, Kerensa, because you are, first off, props for saying ghosted. I mean, that gives you a lot of cred as our National Principal of the Year. I'm proud of you. But since you're our National Principal, you speak for all of us in a way. And so how do we get equity right across these United States?
I think it goes back to what Tommy said. It's different for every community for where you're starting from. I think I realized that we were not having the same conversations in our area, in our state, in our district when I attended the Public Educational Leadership Project at Harvard in 2016. And the conversations that other districts were having, now some of them had very different scenarios where they were working in areas that had a very strong voucher program, but just the conversations around equity were not happening at the same level that they were in other parts of the nation, is what I can say. And so that's part of my passion for this work, is that we said we were being equitable, but we were never talking about it. And we weren't getting those results that Tommy just mentioned, and making those shifts that we needed to make. And so I do think that the pandemic has really provided us an opportunity to make changes quickly that needed to be made years ago, in some cases. So I think we have an opportunity to make those changes, to make them quickly, and I'm with you, Stephen. There's no reason to go back to what we considered normal.
Yeah, we have to take an opportunity to redeem ourselves, and also, more importantly, allow others a chance to redeem themselves as well in that equation. Equality opens the doors for everyone to have access to it. Equity is providing a pathway to those doors. What are you doing in your school, Kerensa, to create pathways to doors? You mentioned a few things earlier. Can you elaborate on those or add more that come to your mind?
Well, in looking at our programs, and what do our students in our programs, what are their backgrounds, what are the student groups that we're working with, really making sure that, like when we're testing for gifted in third grade, that we're using a portfolio model so that we're looking at students' work, not just their test scores, because we feel like that's really important, especially with our linguistically diverse students, because I've got 26 different home languages spoken at my school. And there's no way for us to be able to truly give them some standardized test to determine if gifted or not. So really trying to look at their body of work when we're looking in that particular program. And as they come into high school, they're taking the PSAT at the 8th grade level and the 10th grade level that's fully paid for. So we're looking at AP potential. And you can go into AP potential and play with the numbers a little bit and determine what kind of invitations you want to send out to students and how they match up with potential AP courses during their high school career. So I really challenge each and every student to take an advanced placement course, to take a dual enrollment course, to leave with college credit, to leave with something other than just a diploma, to make sure that they are able to have some type of work experience. I mean, there's a wide range of industry certifications, something that's more than their high school diploma to help them move on, because our students are not going to be able to, unless they get a full ride to college, they're going to have to work and pay their way through college. We don't, at least at my school, I don't have anybody that's independently wealthy that, you know, they have a great college savings plan with in the midst of the recession that the kids have lived through.
Right. You know, it's interesting. Tommy said something earlier about looking at your data and seeing where kids are, what classes they're taking. I have a 16-year-old grandson who moved from Maryland to North Carolina 2 years ago, and I think he was 8th grade and scored really high on the pre-SAT. He is 16 now, and in May he will walk across the stage and grab a high school diploma in his left hand and a 2-year college associate's degree in his right hand. As an African-American male, though, his journey has been that he's been the only African-American male in AP classes. He scored 29 on the ACT. And so he's set, but I would say to him often, you need company in those classes. You need people who look like you in those classes. But he's been a standalone, and it hurts me to my heart because you can't tell me, I've been in education 37 years, that there are not other Black and brown children who can't function in those classes and do well. And so as adults in education, we have a primary responsibility to ensure diversity. But there's a difference between diversity and inclusion. Diversity means you invite me to the dance, Clarissa, but inclusion means when I get to the dance, somebody's going to ask me to dance, right? So we have primary responsibilities for children under our care to make sure that we challenge them to that next level, because they're, like Dr. Hammond says, there are students who don't believe
Right.
that they belong there. And so we must do a better job doing that. Tommy, speak to what I said about equality and pathways to doors. What are you doing in your large school district to create pathways to these doors, not just access to them?
So I think the important thing about the pathways is to understand, you gave an example of one of where are the potential barriers of inequities that create pathways to success. So when you talk about the end goal, the opportunity to go on to postgraduate college or schools or institutions and continue on, or the earning potential, how do you attach that to the classes, access that students have within the school? So when you begin to do things like that, you find out that if students have a certain level of math, they're more likely to be accepted into certain colleges or universities. So you begin to start to look back and see, are you unintentionally tracking students based upon their ability to have access to the highest level of math? So calculus is a great measurement of that. And in order for a student to do that, they really need to have exposure to high level math in elementary school and middle school to be able to move forward on that trajectory. So those are examples of how we do it. Kerensa gave a great example of advanced placement on our balanced scorecards as a school district, which is essentially the principal's assessment of their evaluation. So on that balanced scorecard, we actually have an equity measurement for who takes your advanced placement classes, and then how many of those students actually take the exam. So that is a part of the principal's, what we call weighted school assessment. So that's a measurement for equity on there. Another piece that we have on there is performance in context, which means that it's not good enough for you to be the best school in the district or the best school in the state. Let's compare your student population groups, students, to like schools. Are you outperforming schools that are very similar to you in context? So it creates an opportunity for them to stretch beyond, but also to ensure that you're educating all students. Those are a couple of things that we're doing, but I want to share a couple of other unique things that I think we do as a district. We intentionally have created opportunities for students, underserved students in the area of STEM in Gwinnett County Public Schools. We reach out to partners who have special interests, and one of them would be Go STEM, which is out of Georgia Tech. They had a special interest in increasing not only Hispanics in the area of STEM, but also females in the area of STEM. So you see in Gwinnett County Public Schools that there is, comparatively so to national average, we have more minorities that are involved in STEM. You have more females that are involved in STEM. So we actually created a focus school we call Paul Duke STEM Academy, which was recognized nationally for having a large portion of females involved, but also non-traditional students involved in the area of STEM. So not only do we create measurements, once we have the measurements that show us we're not getting the results we desire, we then create mechanisms to disrupt the educational system that was designed to ensure that we redesign it to create intentional outcomes.
And
we are a school district. Yeah, remember, we're a school district that's over 140,000 students of color.
Right. And my school in particular, at Collins Hill, we're only 19% white. So, you know, again, we have a RISE program, reimagining science and technology through engineering. And our STEM program is very, the student groups are very similar to our student population overall. We have about 40% females, and we're a state certified STEM program. So, you know, creating those opportunities, that's one of the things that I helped develop when I arrived at Collins Hill as principal. I had a group of teachers that came to me and wanted to do a STEM program, and they wanted to do it with all gifted students. And I said, absolutely not. I cannot support that. It has to be open to all kids. And we don't have any sort of application process. Any kid that wants to be in it can be in it. And it's high level project-based learning, integrated curriculum, and it's great for our kids, and they do amazing things.
That's amazing. You know, we are in the business of creating educational opportunities for students until they can create them for themselves. That's the bedrock of equity work. And if we can do that and do that successfully, we've done more than our job. Mark, we are at the 5-minute mark, and I see the chat box lit with 64 entries. 63 of them are probably yours, but can you tell us whether we have any questions or comments for our two guests today?
I do have two, if I can share. One is, what do districts need from the universities to support their equity efforts?
Wow. A great question. Yeah, I wish my wife was home right now and ask her to have her come on here, because I've got a loaded answer for that. Go ahead, John.
So a couple of things. So for universities, I think that the largest thing that we need now is for equity work to be embedded within the curriculum for our pre-service teachers.
Yes.
But also to align it with the districts that are moving forward the area of equity within their districts. So some things that we've done is we partner with our area universities to make sure that our framework that we're using is aligned, and that we're putting out best practice in regards to that. The other piece that I think is essential is that using the area universities to provide additional services or wraparound services for your districts that you're involved with. So the example that I gave you in regards to STEM, that was an initiative that we partnered with Georgia Tech for. So the universities have to take part in making their communities better and more equitable through providing their just-in-time research and services.
And we've tried to develop K-16 partnerships with GGC and UGA that are nearby for us, to really make sure that our students can see where their pathway would lead as they're leaving our programs.
You know, we have two Georgia folks, and I know for a fact, because I saw some of the registrations we have, it's so good to see clients that I'm working with, Mark's working with, Texas, Pennsylvania, New York. We have two Georgia leaders today, but we invite you to go to the chat box to ask any question you might have in regards to what's happening in your state or school district and so forth. While you're doing that, Mark, and pulling out another one or two, I want to remind us that, you know, this is a time for us to to stop engaging in conversations around race and begin to facilitate discussion about race. It's okay. You know, people are saying now, God, it makes me uncomfortable. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because this is the day and time that we have to make change happen in public education in America. Thank God we have this platform. While we may not be able to engage face to face, it gives us an opportunity to come together, people from all over the world, to engage in conversation and reflection. Mark and I encourage you, when you leave here, we designed this to be able to come back. Mark's going to give you information on what happens next week, same time at 4 o'clock. We're on the same team with the same dream. And so, Pastor Mark, now I want to thank Kerensa. Thank you, Tommy, for a great webinar this afternoon and for the work you do in the field.
Absolutely. I do have one question that came up in the chat box I want to honor, if I may, because I think it's an important one. At what time on the journey, Kerensa and Tommy, do you involve parents in the larger community? We all know that we have enough work to do to improve our approach towards equity within our schools, but we won't really make all the difference we want until we engage the larger community. So when do you do that in the process that you guys have been working on?
I've done it from the beginning of my process, because I feel like my local school council and my PTA and the parents that I connect with, they need to see that our school is serving the needs of our community. And so I don't think you can separate the work from the parents and community.
100% agree. You have to understand what equity means for part of your needs assessment is to understand what your community's needs are, and you don't grasp that until you ask them, and then you can use their messaging to design or redesign the systems or the instruction that's needed to move forward what they desire. Remember, every community is going to be at a very different point in their journey in equity. Your responsibility as a leader is to find out where they are, create a vision for where you need to go, develop that plan so that you can get there.
Of what comes next. How do we respond to this call that Stephen has left us with? How do we respond to you can't ignore it once you know it, guys. Kerensa and Tommy have wonderfully done the work and shared the work. And when you know better, you got to do better. So we would just want to try to help have a model of sharing. Kerensa, Tommy, you guys are always great, and thank you so much for coming on with us. We couldn't have had a better kickoff to what we're doing. And Stephen, my friend, take us home from here.
Yeah, so thank you, Kerensa. Thank you, Tommy. Continue to do the great work in the field. I put in the text box. Thank you to everyone for the heavy lifting you're doing. Last but not least, thank you to Albany State University and the Wallace Foundation for enabling us the platform to produce this and to put it out there for free for you all. Call your cousins, tell them to join us next week. We'll see you. God bless.